Truth and Reconciliation Day tomorrow in Canada, right across Canada. I guess more than half of Canadians won't celebrate it, which is it something you celebrate? I guess that's the term for a holiday. But what I wanted to talk about on this story more than anything is there's a lot of talk about what needs to be done to honor, to acknowledge, to get to the bottom of this. And I think it's in the title. There's Truth and Reconciliation. We've been working on truth and reconciliation from a premise of lies, and we can show this next story. We criticize CBC a lot, the odd time, and there's major problems with this reports. With this report, there's a lot of apologetics for ground penetrating radar, and there's a lot of sort of discussion about how, oh well, this doesn't mean that this is the case elsewhere. They also don't reveal the fact, which spoiler alert, but they don't find anything whatsoever when they're excavating until about 2/3 of the way through the very dramatic film. But the First Nations community in this video, and I think it's Pine, sorry, the title's just disappearing here, but it's Pine Creek First Nations. Their chief said, we don't know what we're going to find. There might be nothing. There might be something. But their community, apparently some of the locals wanted to just go in and dig immediately, saying, we need to know if there's something here, if there isn't. And of course, they said, well, we need to hire professionals. But their chief said, whatever the truth may be, we need to get to the bottom of it. And we need to dig. So they took the sort of 14 most promising ground penetrating pings that happened to be in the basement of a church, and lo and behold, as we've predicted in so many of these cases, and they say they don't want people saying we predicted this or I told you so, but the fact is this seems to be the case. We've also said if there are graves, dig them so that people can be held accountable. But nothing was found whatsoever here, and the people are relieved that nothing was found, because the horror stories that they've been told, the horror stories that broke the hearts of the community. I, for one, and one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is because I've talked to First Nations people who have just wept because they believe that mass murders took place of children. They believe that that's what they've been told, and that is quite simply not the case. That is not what happened. So truth and reconciliation is necessary. What happened to First Nations people, this government did plan to get rid of them. They planned to erase their culture. When that didn't really work, they were like, we can leave them to die. Our government did that. That is true. We need to tackle the government that's currently espousing similar policies and forcing people to accept indoctrination and education that they don't believe in. Our government has learned nothing whatsoever, but they want everyone else paying and suffering. They don't care that First Nations communities are torn up by this because they're scoring political points. But we need to dig absolutely everywhere, sensitively, professionally. We need scholars to do it, to unveil the truth so that we can come to reconciliation. Because until that is done, until digs like this, they dug 14 of 71 possible sites and absolutely nothing was found whatsoever. Until that is done at all of these sites, these people, it's like waiting for someone to pass. You don't know the information. Someone could dig and find these answers, but these communities are just waiting, just suffering. And every year is another day of truth and reconciliation rolls by, and we haven't unveiled the truth here. There's just more hurt, more suffering, more division. These communities deserve answers, and I for one, am grateful to the chief from Pine Creek for First Nations for providing his community with answers.
Well, and maybe I could just add, if we can pull up that the Truth and Reconciliation headline for a second, you see that Canadians are less inclined to celebrate. 57%, I believe it was, are less inclined to support this movement. Yeah, 50% also believe that there are other issues. Pardon me, but they won't be celebrating Truth and Reconciliation Day. And I actually think this is a sad thing. Perhaps quasi in alignment with you, not because I think that the inflammatory remarks Justin Trudeau made about this are valid. I think that there does need to be sympathy for real issues that we have, as you address. There's an actual history there where not everybody was the winner. So I do think it is sad that there is that deflation. But where did this headline come from? Why is it that there's a decrease in interest? Well, because the peak interest, it was brought in around the time on the tail end of the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States. And this was a huge issue. There were cities being lit on fire. And this was like our version of that. Truth and Reconciliation, a bunch of dead Native kids somewhere in the backwoods of Canada. And Trudeau got the nation riled up. He put fuel on this fire. He made it completely political. And then now, when it's no longer convenient for him, well, you can see see he's not advocating it. He's not pumping it out. He's not doing the photo shoots and surfing that he was doing previously when advocating for these things. He just doesn't care because it's not as useful to him anymore. So that's where, I do remain, sympathetic to the people that have had issues from, the real history that we have here in Canada.
Yeah, and I'm extreme. I think having these conversations and this chief who's willing to dig is the perspective of people who are actually sympathetic towards the plights of First Nations people. Most people who are in line with the liberal agenda and on board with the sort of woke addressing of First Nations issues, they haven't been out to a First Nations community. They haven't had conversations with the people. They haven't seen the hurt. And they sort of put First Nations people on a pedestal where they don't interact with them as people. And that's factual. They aren't willing to have conversations that they'd have with anybody else with First Nations people because they view them as these sort of other creatures. And that's terrible. That is racism. We need to come together. And I remember one of the elders, I won't even say his name to get him in heat or anything, but one of the very respected elders said, you know what, I'm sick of these politics. I'm an Indian, you're a white man. Let's sit down and have tea together. Those are the types of conversations we need to have. Get over this sort of abstraction and division that this liberal government has just been driving at for so long. We need to get together, and you've hit the nail on the head there. We do need to get to the roots of this, the suffering, the current ongoing issues within First Nations cultures, the lack of access to clean water that is still devastating and heartbreaking. And this government constantly sort of prides himself on being the ones dealing with it, and certainly campaigns on dealing with it, but they quite simply aren't when you're talking to people in these communities firsthand and directly. That's what we need to break down, the stigma around these conversations, so that we can get to the truth of the matter. Truth and reconciliation, that is what it is all about. Looking forward in the next coming while to covering more stories on this issue. But yeah, folks, go out, experience the culture, go to there's museums wherever you are. These people are eager to share their culture, and you can learn from them. And then next time someone says, oh, well, I've never been to a reservation or spoken to First Nations people, but Justin Trudeau told me this about First Nations people, you can be like, well, actually, I was over with this elder from this community, and they actually told me this. The picture that this government has painted of First Nations people in this country is not what First Nations people are. And if you meet them firsthand, you're going to realize that very, very quickly. So it's certainly a tense issue. But tomorrow, you know what? If you're like, I'm sick of Truth and Reconciliation, reject what the government has made it. Throw that away. Put that by the wayside, and take a moment to consider part of the heritage and part of the culture that built Canada. These people contributed in our war efforts. We would have not been what we are without them in the war efforts. They've contributed fundamentally. You look at some of the legacies, particularly in World War II, with languages being used as coding mechanisms. They're a critical part of our culture that cannot be forgotten, and we do have to look to the harms of the past, the things that have occurred, to ensure that they do not happen again. So tomorrow, don't let them make Truth and Reconciliation Day a woke thing that is anti-culture, that is anti-Canadian, that is what Trudeau wants it to be. Reappropriate it, make it your own, and take a moment to think about Aboriginal contributions in this country.
Hey folks, that was a clip from the daily live stream. I co-host it Monday to Thursday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Alberta team takes over on Friday. Please tune in. And by the way, we want to hear your 2 cents worth. If you're able to make a minimal $5 donation, we will read your chat on the air live. Thank you.
Justin Trudeau's new censorship law, Bill C-18. It's a shakedown and a desperate attempt to keep the mainstream media afloat. Many have already lost their ability to access our Facebook and Instagram pages. The blackout will soon affect every user in Canada. We've partnered with Private Internet Access, a VPN provider dedicated to safeguarding digital privacy. For just $2 a month, you can maintain your access to our content across all your devices at piavpn.com/rebelnews.